Good morning and welcome to Ceramics Storytime with Sue. I'm Sue McLeod, and today we're going to read my Ceramics Monthly TechnoFile article called The Myth of Air Bubbles, or the Air Bubble Myth. So if you would like to follow along, you can go to the link that's scrolling across the bottom of the screen, bit.ly/air bubble myth. And that'll take you to the post on my website where you can either read the post online or you can also download a copy of the TechnoFile from Ceramics Monthly if you like. So that's bit.ly/air bubble myth. And if you're joining me here live, please say hello in the comments. Let me know that you can see and hear me. And I'm just going to confirm that I'm live now. Looks to be true. So, okay, perfect. Yeah, so just say hi. Let me know where you're joining me from. And if you would like to ask questions while I'm reading the article, you're welcome to do so. There's a link that you can follow because I'm using third-party software to record this live video, and then I'm going to share my screen with you. You have to give Facebook, or you have to give the software permission for me to see your names through Facebook. So I'm just going to post that link that you need to click in the comments, and that will allow me to see your name. So I'll see your, if you don't click the link, then it'll just say Facebook user, and then I won't see your name. So hello, Michael from France. Hi, Deb. Okay, there, now I can see them better. Hello from Michigan. I see John from Michigan. So I do see you guys also in Facebook. But when I'm looking at the live video on the Facebook screen, I can't actually scroll through your comments. So it makes it a little bit tricky. So hey, Joan, and hello from Ontario, and hello, Lynn from Winnipeg. Awesome. And hi from Vancouver Island. I can't see who that is. But hello from Vancouver Island. That's where I live. I live in beautiful Souk, British Columbia. So before I start reading, I just wanted to make an announcement that I have an online workshop coming up on April the 24th. It's about how to mix your own glazes from scratch. So if you've never mixed a glaze before, if you just use commercial glazes, if you've always wanted to learn how to mix your own glazes from a recipe, that's what the workshop will be about. So I will teach you how to mix your own glazes from scratch, kind of how to read a recipe, how to batch a recipe for different sizes, a little bit about what all the materials do, and then we'll take a base glaze and we'll test it with multiple different colorants, and that's called a color run. And so I'll teach you how to do that as well. So then you'll learn how to mix glazes, and then also some glaze testing that you can do with any glaze recipe that you like. So if you are interested, you can go to my website. If you go to, wait, here we go. If you go to bit.ly/glaze mixing workshop, that'll take you to the info page that will give you the whole outline of the workshop, and you can register there. So that's bit.ly/glaze mixing workshop. If that's something that you're interested. That's April 24th. Okay, so now back to the air bubble myth. So we're going to talk about air bubbles. If we leave an air bubble in our clay, is that going to cause an explosion in the kiln? So a lot of people are taught this when they're first starting out. It's one of those things that kind of gets passed around, and it's not entirely true. And so there is a bit of truth, which I explain in the article, where if you enclose if you enclose air in your clay, it could lead to an explosion in the kiln, but it's not the air that's causing the explosion. It's actually the moisture that gets trapped. So I will explain all of that in the article. And let me just change up what's on my screen here. So that is the link scrolling across the bottom of the screen, and that will take you to this article here on my website, The Myth of Air Bubbles. And then you can download the TechnoFile if you like by clicking this link, and then just enter your email address. And so this article was printed in Ceramics Monthly magazine, beautiful cover image. And so if you turn to page, this is the April 2021 edition. You turn to page 54, 55, we've got the air bubble myth. So anyways, I think it's cool that my article got published in a magazine. So that is that. And I'm going to get started reading this post. So if you have any comments or questions while I'm reading, feel free to just type them into the comment section, and then I will pause periodically and answer those for you. Okay. The myth of air bubbles. There's a common belief in ceramics that leaving pockets of air in your clay, either due to insufficient wedging or by creating an enclosed form, leads to explosions in the kiln. The belief is often communicated in these ways. Poorly wedged clay containing air bubbles will explode. Or, if you create an enclosed form, you need to poke a hole for the air to escape or it will explode. While it's true that enclosed pockets of air in your clay can lead to explosions, the explosions don't have anything to do with air being trapped and unable to escape. The explosions have everything to do with trapped water. If your pieces aren't 100% dry inside and out, problems can arise during the firing. So let's talk about what happens when water is heated. At room temperature, water naturally evaporates. Natural evaporation happens relatively slowly and is dependent on the humidity of the surrounding atmosphere. If the relative humidity of the surrounding air reaches 100%, evaporation stops until the moist air is replaced with drier air and evaporation can continue. As water is heated, the molecules start to move faster and evaporation speeds up. If we continue to heat to boiling temperature, water, a liquid, converts to steam, a gas. At sea level, this occurs at 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius. 3 important facts about water turning to steam. Number 1, it expands greatly in size, over 1,500 times. Number 2, it can produce a high amount of pressure. And number 3, this all happens at a very high speed. So as water converts to steam, it expands greatly in size, which creates a lot of pressure, and it happens very, very quickly. So you can imagine how that could cause our clay, which is quite fragile, to explode. Consider boiling a kettle of water. As the water begins to boil, you hear a faint whistling sound. As more water converts to steam, it expands, increasing the pressure in the kettle, which increases the speed at which the steam passes through the tone hole, and the whistling sound gets louder. When the kiln temperature starts to climb, any moisture left in the clay starts to evaporate faster. If that moisture reaches boiling temperature before it has a chance to evaporate, it will convert to steam. The expansion, pressure, and high speed of water converting to steam within a clay body will cause the clay to explode, unlike the kettle that allows the steam to escape. This is why it's so important for clay to be completely dry before it's fired. So the question of the day is, do air bubbles cause explosions? When clay is wet, all the spaces in between the clay particles are filled with water. As the water evaporates, the clay becomes porous, meaning there are tiny pathways of void space, air, in between the solid clay particles. Essentially, bone-dry clay is full of teeny tiny pockets of air. Air within the clay is not a problem. If we make a piece and we leave an air bubble in the clay, that air pocket does not directly pose a risk of explosion. Air is free to move through those tiny porous pathways in the dry clay. Only water leads to explosions. It's a causation correlation misconception to say that air causes explosions. While enclosed air doesn't cause explosions, it can prevent thorough drying and trap moisture, which does cause explosions. When we enclose air bubbles within a clay form, that pocket of air provides water molecules with a nice humid place to hang out. A thin piece of clay with an air bubble will dry in fire without issue. When the clay is thicker, it can feel very dry on the outside, while the inside still contains moisture. When the kiln temperature rises, the air pockets fill with water vapor, which builds pressure as water turns to steam. The pressure of the steam causes the clay to explode from the inside. Say you throw an enclosed form or you join two pinch pots together. Poking a hole will promote more thorough drying before the firing by allowing dry air to circulate so evaporation can occur from the inside as well as the outside. The bigger the hole, the faster the piece will dry. During the firing, the hole gives the steam a pathway to exit, preventing pressure from building up and hopefully preventing an explosion. But it is possible to leave air bubbles in your clay and make enclosed forms without holes in them that don't explode in the kiln. That was a question. But is it possible to leave air bubbles in your clay and make enclosed forms without holes in them that don't explode in the kiln? The answer is yes. If the clay is 100% dry inside and out at the time it reaches boiling temperature, there is zero risk of explosion. But on the flip side, explosions can occur even when air bubbles are not present if your clay isn't thoroughly dry. So here's a lovely example of, this was at Cedar Hill Studio where I work. This was a child's piece of pottery, which this often happens with. They often make these really large, elaborate forms that take forever to dry, and they're super, super heavy. And we do leave them to dry as long as possible, but sometimes, you know, the clay is so thick that the piece feels dry on the outside, but then there's still trapped moisture on the inside. And so we do have clay explosions, you know, not every firing, but quite often. Especially when you're teaching a class and you want to get, you know, the students' pieces out in time for them to, like, for the class to finish. You can't leave them on the drying rack for months at a time. So it's just something that we've learned to deal with. So how to ensure pieces are dry. Pardon. Two factors contribute to quicker evaporation. One is heat and the other is air circulation. The most common advice is to candle your kiln, which means you turn the kiln on low and hold it just below boiling temperature until all the moisture has escaped. While this is good advice, it isn't fail-safe, especially with thicker clay. Candling doesn't always complete the drying process in a reasonable amount of time. While I do recommend candling your kiln as a final measure, I would suggest using air circulation initially so your pieces are as dry as possible before they enter the kiln. Air circulation is effective because evaporation speeds up as the humidity of the surrounding air decreases. If the air is completely still, evaporation will cause a cloud of moisture to form around the piece, slowing down further evaporation. If that moist air is replaced with drier air, evaporation continues. The easiest way to accomplish this is by using a fan to circulate air around your drying wares. So the fan, when you have a fan on your piece, so you've got your piece here, water is evaporating. If the air is still, it creates this humid cloud around your piece. And if you blow that humid air away, if you blow the moist air away, then drier air replaces it, and then that allows the evaporation to continue. And so air circulation is a really effective way of drying your pots. So make sure your pieces are already fairly dry before putting a fan on them, or they may dry unevenly and crack. So I would always wait till past the leather hard stage, so past the point where the clay has stiffened up. And once the pieces are starting to look dry, then put a fan on them. So you don't want to increase the drying, speed up the drying so much that your pieces shrink at different rates, and that's what causes cracking. So make sure that they're already mostly dry before putting a fan on them, or they may dry unevenly and crack. While the fan is on, periodically turn your pieces over to allow the air to reach all sides. If you can add heat to the circulating air, this will further speed up drying. If your kiln is vented, be sure to turn the vent fan on while candling to help remove the humid air in the kiln. And then here is an example of the moisture test that I do when I'm trying to decide if the kiln is ready to kind of increase in temperature. So if you've ever fired a kiln full of damp pots before, and you have the kiln preheating, we program a really long preheat on our bisque firings, just because at the rec center we have a lot of beginners, a lot of children working, and so there's a lot of thicker pieces that do take longer to dry. So we will hold the temperature of the kiln around 190 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 hours. And that's just because we want as many successful pieces as possible. But if you want to test to see if all the moisture is finished escaping, then here is a moisture test that you can do. So damp clay is cool to the touch, whereas dry clay is room temperature. If your pot feels cool, if your pots feel cool, they're probably not ready for the bisque firing. Be sure to check the bottoms and the insides. Once you're sure your pots are thoroughly dry, you can load them into the kiln and start the candling process for good measure. Keep the kiln temperature low until all residual moisture has escaped. A simple way of checking for moisture escaping the kiln is to hold a piece of glass or plastic, and I use my safety glasses, but I've also used a mirror, like a little mirror in the past. Whatever's handy. And so you place a piece of glass or plastic near one of the open peepholes during the candling. If it fogs up, this is a sign that there's still moisture escaping the kiln. Continue candling until there is no longer any sign of moisture, and then proceed with the firing as usual. So here you can see in this picture, so I'm taking my safety glasses. I hold it up to the peep here, not too close. You don't want it to melt. And so this is during our preheat time where we're holding the temperature at 190 degrees Fahrenheit. And so here you can see the glasses have fogged up. And so that is a sure sign that there's still moisture escaping the kiln. And so if you are still seeing your glasses or your mirror or whatever fogging up, then that's a sign that your kiln, that moisture is still escaping, and you need to keep your kiln on low until there's no longer any sign of moisture coming out of your pots. And so once your glasses look like this after holding them in front of the peephole, then that is a good sign that you can kick it into high gear and increase your bisque firing temperature. So that is it. So again, if you want to download this article from Ceramics Monthly, I have permission from them to share this with you. you can just click the link here, and then I will send you this PDF file. And so if you have any questions about air bubbles in your clay, or anything, like maybe you were taught something different and you are not sure whether it's true or like whether it is a factor in causing clay explosions, please feel free to let me know. If you're watching this on the replay, you can still type in the comments and then I will check back and answer them. But if there are no questions, then I will probably let you go here. And then I will be back in a couple of weeks for story time. So next week I'll be putting out a new blog post, and then the week after that I will read it live to you for story time. So I hope that that was a helpful article for you in ensuring that, you know, you're not like, sometimes the fear of a clay explosion is going to kind of inhibit our creative, you know, the plans that we have for the clay. And so when you know how clay dries and when you know the cause of explosions, you can make different forms. You can even make enclosed forms. You just have to let them dry for a longer period of time. And I recommend circulating air. But, you know, people make knobs, enclosed knobs on the lids of their pots, and that encloses air. Some people do like a hollow rim on their bowl. Someone mentioned that in the Facebook group earlier. And so those are like just examples of how you can enclose air and it's not going to lead to an explosion, provided that the clay is dry. Just checking the comments here. Oh, John says the myth of the air bubble is still prevalent. Yes, it is. Yeah, I hear people talk about it all the time. And so please spread the word and let people know and point them towards this article, because I understand why people think that. Like, it makes sense why, because I think what happens is someone will make a pot and it will explode, and then they'll look at the shrapnel from the pot and they'll see those air bubbles that were left there. And so it's like, oh, well, there was an air bubble and that's why my piece exploded. But that is not always the case. So thank you all for joining me live here. I always love it when I have people watching me live and saying hello in the chat. So thank you again for coming, and I will see you next time on Storytime.